Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Dear friends, I've done a lot of crying today, so please forgive me if my voice doesn't come through too well. My dear friends, I've spoken here before on Yom HaShoah. I told you then of my childhood, how I grew up in Lodz, Poland. I told you then how my childhood was ripped from me as the ghetto was closed around us. I told you then that I was deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and that on the day we arrived, I not only lost my childhood, but I lost my baby brother and dear mother. May their memory be for a bracha. I told you then of the work camp Ederan that I was sent to, and the death march I endured at the end of the war. Finally, I told you of my eventual liberation by the Russians at the concentration camp of Theresienstadt, just outside of Prague. It was there that I met my late husband Benny and the others who were to become my family. And this brings me on what I would like to talk to you about today, and the horrors that I endured, but not the horrors that I endured, but rather the reality of survival, of living life as a survivor. It is something that I carry with me every hour of every day. We survivors are a dying breed. I am more often present at Leviat than at Simchas these days. So let me tell you how being a survivor of the Shoah has affected me. A group of us, all youths, were sponsored to be brought over from Theresienstadt to England after liberation. We affectionately called our group the Boys. The historian Martin Gilbert has written a book about our group. It was these individuals who were to become my brothers and sisters, and in turn, they were the uncles and aunties for my three girls. Like Benny and I, members of our group often married each other. At our wedding, we had no family present, but in truth, they were all family. We didn't talk much about our experiences in those days. If we did, we would only talk about them late at night in hushed voices once the children had gone to sleep. We only wanted to forget, but it was those experiences that bound us together. We found comfort in the fact that we had all been through hell, and there was no need to talk much about it. I didn't talk to my girls about what had happened to us. They grew up knowing that we were survivors, but much more than that, not much more than living life was my sole concern. To do as much as I could for my family, excuse me. I worked many years as a nurse, giving to others as I had never been given to. Benny was always trying to make it in business. At least once he realized that acting didn't put bread on the table. I can't remember how many times he pawned and then later bought back my engagement ring to fund one of his ventures. Eventually, thank God, He found his business and his success. Many of us survivors have little quirks that we keep with us through our lives. For Benny, it was extravagance and over-generosity. Once he had money, nothing was too much for his girls or his wife. But before even money came his way, Benny was always laughing, cracking a joke, despite there being a hardness beneath. Laughter and gaiety was our escape from the pain of the past. I also have my own little quirk. I always keep the fridge overstocked. I know that a significant proportion of the food will go to waste, but it doesn't matter. After one experiences true hunger, you too would want your fridge to be full to bursting. Time passed, and Benny wanted to return to Poland to set up a memorial in his hometown of Skarżysko and to visit the camps. He took me with him, but I was not ready to return. I came back and fell ill for many weeks as the memories and sorrow threatened to overwhelm me. But I'm a survivor. It is a mentality that I live by, that I have given to my children and grandchildren. We must survive. We must live and do as best as we can. It's all we can do, but we must do it. Excuse me. 20 years ago, Benny died from cancer. He had a sincere wish to live and die in Israel. To be honest, this is not a dream that I shared. I was very happy in London, but having come here, I appreciate what it means to live in Israel. A number of years later, I married Joseph Katz, whom you all know. It should be of little surprise that Joseph is also a survivor. More recently, I've been able to give my experiences. I was interviewed by Steven Spielberg's foundation. In truth, the story that I tell of my time during the war is not rich in detail. I have buried most of my memories of that time. What remains is the bare framework of what happened to me. You see, I never wanted to remember. I was never interested in remembering the fear and atrocities that I had to endure. Some of my friends have reached their old age, and as a result woken up to their mortality. Their mortality, is something they had felt very keenly before in their broken childhood. Reliving their past has made them depressed and withdrawn. They cannot sleep without nightmares of men in dark uniforms and death all around. That is not a problem that I face so. I'm a survivor. I only look and strive for the good that can be found. I would like to conclude by sharing with you an experience that gave me a sense of closure, that laid my ghosts to rest. You see, my father died 6 months before the war started, and there was no time or resources to put up a headstone for him. But a few years ago, my grandson went with his yeshiva to Poland, and using the tour guide's contacts, managed to determine which grave in the Lodge Cemetery was my father's. This was a motivation that I needed. 2 years later, I went back to Poland. This time, not as a broken girl or a scarred adult, but as a survivor, leading a group of people from my daughter's shul. 2 of my daughters, a son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren accompanied me. I was well armed and prepared this time, with my family and legacy with me. We visited Warsaw and Krakow, and then back to Auschwitz, where I recounted the story of my arrival, of the lights, the bright lights, and people running everywhere, and the dogs barking, and the selections, and children separate, men separate. I was left with my mother on one side, only where oh yes, I told them of the bright light selections of the Puritan. I told them of how we had to strip, had our hair shaved off, and then went into the showers where my mother was taken away from me, a wound that has never healed. 8 weeks of continuous selections, standing naked in all weathers, in front of Dr. Mengele and his assistant, as they chose which side to go on. Once Dr. Mengele stopped me and asked me how old I was. I told him, big lie. But anyway, he let me pass through. Eventually, we ended up going to lodge. We visited my old family home in Lodge, even went up to the flat that had been my family's. It was so strange seeing Polish Gentiles living in my parents' home. There was even the old anti-Semitic graffiti sprayed on the stairway walls. I walked around my old hometown, recalling my childhood experiences to the group, and at the same time laying my ghosts to rest. Finally, we arrived at the Lodge Cemetery, where we arranged for a Metzever to be put up for my father. We performed the Hakomas Metzever ceremony. My son-in-law said Kaddish, and my grandson gave a Dvar Torah. This was my closure. This was my revenge. This is my legacy. Also stood in a bunkhouse in Birkenau, crying for the last time over the memories of smoky skies and endless elections. When I had finished, the group and my family danced with me. They had brought with them a little Sefer Torah, and we sang Am Yisrael Chai. We must never forget the horrors that men can do, but we must also never forget that we are still here, that Am Yisrael Chai. We have survived. I think that we all need to live with the name survivor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you must agree with me, having heard literally nothing but admiration for Mrs. Sarah Newton-Katz. I now call upon Rabbi Raphael Katz.